Hello and welcome. It is Sunday night, so that means it's the night to watch football and, of course, Tidal Flooding Talk. My name is Palma Accardi, and I'm here with Dan Barone, and he is a South Jersey native and a graduate of Stockton with a PhD from Rutgers. Dan Skeldon will not be here tonight. He is feeling under the weather, but we will still manage. We're at the Irish Pub every Sunday night, so you're welcome to join us here live in person or, of course, on Facebook. If you are watching us live, you can ask us questions. As you know, usually Dan's looking and answering the questions, but I will get to them at the end of the feed. So before we get started, I want to ask Dan,
Sure.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thanks, Palma. Hello, everyone at home. My name's Dan Barone. As Palma said, I am a South Jersey native. I grew up in the Long Beach Island region of the Jersey Shore. Spent my summers in the Holgate section of Long Beach Island. I have been living in southern New Jersey since that time. Since growing up, I attended Stockton for marine science. I got my master's degree there as well, and I got my PhD from Rutgers in coastal geomorphology and geography. And before moving to Michael Baker International, where I currently work, I worked at the Stockton Coastal Research Center with Dr. Farrell for about 10 years, doing coastal processes research, beaches, as many of you are aware at home. And now I work at Michael Baker International as a department manager for their coastal and environmental services department.
Okay. Now, when did you learn that this was your career path?
I would say I was probably 8 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, I knew I wanted to do something with the ocean. So growing up in Long Beach Island, I was just fascinated with the beaches, waves, how the sand moved, all the sea life, things like that. And, fishing with my father and just growing up surfing. So I've always been fascinated with the ocean. So when I went to college at Stockton, I knew I wanted to do marine science. Just wasn't quite sure what path in marine science I would do, but I wound up becoming very enthralled with the technology side of things and the digital mapping and geographic information systems. So part of my expertise now is doing vulnerability assessments using digital mapping, using Esri software products.
Now, you're working for Michael Baker International. Yep. Tell us a little bit about that company and what you do for them.
So Michael Baker International is a national organization. We have about 100 offices throughout the United States, about 3,000 employees. I work in the Hamilton, New Jersey office, and in that office there's about 150 folks in that office. It's a pretty large operation, and majority of the office, there are several different departments. It's what we call a full-service office, where we often do civil highway work, bridges work. But in my department and our sister department, the Water Resources Group, we focus on everything ranging from environmental permitting, environmental restoration and design, and then my background's in coastal GIS and marine applications, doing vulnerability assessments, dredging assessments, maritime transportation issues, and then the Water Resources Department that we work with very closely focuses on stormwater and drainage. And so we're actually working in several communities along the coast, in particular Ocean City, designing pump stations to address nuisance flooding, things like that. So we offer the full gambit of services along the coast. So whether it's a wetland restoration or it's an infrastructure project like stormwater and drainage, we can get you there.
Now, you said that there's approximately 150 of you here in this area,
Yep.
But you have your department. How many are you generally working with? How many people are you working with in your department?
Between the coastal department and the water department, there's probably around 20, 25 folks, and our expertise related to water, as we call it, which is coastal and rainwater and things like that. We have resiliency planners, so we have people doing hazard mitigation plans for individual counties and the state of New Jersey. And then we also have stormwater engineers. We have geospatial analysts focusing on the mapping side of things, using drones for mapping coastal and tidal wetlands and dredging projects. And then we have permitting specialists helping getting a lot of these infrastructure projects off the ground. So when you go to do a large infrastructure, a stormwater project, or even a smaller one, it requires waterfront development, CAFRA, New Jersey type permits, as well as the federal type Army Corps type.
Generally, for a project, how many different entities do you work with permits?
Oh, It's all of them. So it really depends on the project and the size of the project. So a lot of times, especially in New Jersey, due to the dense building and a lot along the coast here, we're working a lot with waterfront development folks, tidelands, historic preservation office, land use planning, and then we also work with National Marine Fisheries on a lot of projects, and the Army Corps. So most of the DEP folks and a lot of the Army Corps folks as well.
And you mentioned that you're partnering with Ocean City, or at least consulting with Ocean City.
Yes.
Could you tell us how you are helping communities such as Ocean City, and what your company offers to local municipalities?
Yeah, so at Michael Baker International, some of the things I look at it two separate sides of the coin. So we can offer the technical assistance in terms of engineering. So for example, if tidal flooding, you get a high tide, water's coming up through a storm drain. Those nuisance type events we can help address. And we can size projects accordingly for those types of issues. Where you get a rainfall, the tide's up, drain can't get out the drain because they're gravity fed. So we've come up with solutions, for example, addressing nuisance flooding with putting in pump stations in Ocean City. So those are the types of projects where we get a large rainfall, not the sandy type events, but nowadays we're getting more and more of these monthly events where the streets are flooded. These pump stations really help get the rainwater out and people back in their homes much faster than in the past. And then we also do the hazard mitigation planning and risk communication. So Michael Baker's been a contractor with FEMA for the past 40 years or so, and the work we've done has ranged out throughout the years. A lot of it's been floodplain, doing flood studies and mapping. And nowadays what we're doing with all of the regions is we have staff working in the regions doing community engagement and risk communication. So one of the large pushes that FEMA is doing now is what's called the risk map process. So traditionally, FEMA provides the flood insurance rate map that sets a property owner's flood insurance. But now they're trying to get away from just addressing flood insurance, but also trying to communicate the risk involved with living in an area such as a floodplain. So what they can actually offer is geographic information system data sets that you can bring into a map, and you can actually see during a 100-year event how deep will the water be outside my front door.
So just anyone could go onto this and look at their area.
Yeah, and those are the types of tools. So if if the general public has a specific question about the technical nature, we can try to communicate in such a way where it makes sense, and putting it in terms of magnitude of a storm event, how an individual property owner may be impacted.
And you mentioned nuisance flooding, which I think is one of the more important issues because of how frequently we see it. There doesn't have to be a major storm to have nuisance flooding.
That's
correct.
So
these projects that you're working on for nuisance flooding in Ocean City, how much does a typical project like that cost?
It depends on the project, but so one of the things that we're trying to do is try to size them appropriately. So one of the issues that we're seeing is that you're never going to stop the Atlantic Ocean going over a bulkhead. So what we can do now is we can stop the individual tidal events and individual rain events getting out of the streets as quickly as possible. So those types of projects are far less costly than, for example, putting up a flood wall around an entire island or putting up a surge barrier across the tidal inlet. So in terms of cost, there's a lot of opportunities for applying for grants, things like that. But in terms of individual dollars, it really depends on the project and the specific area and how many pumps or something, or not even pumps, or even some type of infrastructure improvement a town would need.
So are these projects things that we can act on now rather than plan for 10 years from now or even farther into the future?
Yeah, so one of the things that the federal government and the state government are doing nowadays is they're doing some pretty intense planning right now for the future, because as many residents know, it's getting stormier. There's a little bit more flooding now, a little more rainfall. So what can we do now to address the nuisance problem before a larger federal agency can come in and do a larger infrastructure project like a surge barrier, a flood wall, things like that. So one of the things that the state is doing is they just announced last week a statewide coastal resilience plan. So at the state level, one of the things that they're doing is trying to prioritize projects throughout the state, and it's going to be key critical to tie in these larger plans to other plans that are being done.
Okay.
For example, the Army Corps of Engineers is working on their Back Bay flood study. So tying those projects together to get more bang for your buck on the local and regional type projects is going to be critical. But what the towns can do now is to start doing some of these smaller level projects. Because it could take several years before a larger project gets underway. Yeah.
Now, Michael Baker International is international with about 100 locations, as you mentioned. But you're working here, and what can you say makes the Jersey coast so unique or different from other areas in terms of flooding?
Well, I think one of the major things that I've noticed, I did my dissertation on the barrier islands of New Jersey and tracking the development across all of the barrier islands. In some other areas, pretty much along the northeast and the east coast of the United States, over the past century there's been rampant development. Whereas in some places like in Europe and other places, they don't build right up against the shoreline. So it's beautiful. We all enjoy the beach. I grew up at the beach. I love to surf and fish and all those things, but there's a certain risk that comes along with that. So what makes New Jersey unique is that we've placed the development so close to the coastline that we have to understand what the risks are and how we can further protect our resources along the Jersey. A lot of the other states are dealing with the same issues, like Miami, North Carolina, Florida, North Carolina. It's not unique to New Jersey, but what is unique to New Jersey is that ever since Hurricane Sandy hit, there's been a lot more engagement,
right,
and awareness of this type of work that needs to happen.
Yes, as Dan Skeldon says, Sandy really woke up the shore, and people are more aware of the risks and the daily threat even of coastal flooding.
Yes.
So what do you think is our greatest challenge?
The biggest challenge, I think, right now is funding.
Okay. Of course. The money.
So, it's typically the problem. As of right now, New Jersey has what's called the Shore Protection Fund. They get about, I think, $25 million a year, and that's been the same amount for many years.
Is that at like the state level?
That's at the state level.
Okay.
But what happens now, because the New Jersey coastline, the developed coastline, has authorized beach replenishment projects from the Army Corps of Engineers. And since New Jersey is the state partner, a lot of that funding goes towards that. So there really needs to be more funding to focus on the Back Bay efforts for a local share for federal type Back Bay flooding and nuisance flooding projects. So funding's a big one, but the other main part is just getting all the different players involved sitting at the table. And I think New Jersey and the Army Corps are really trying to do that. They're really trying to bring all the communities and the subject matter experts, the academia, industry together for these types of plans and talking to each other.
Now, for these major projects, not so much the individual communities, but for the major projects, is funding available only if communities are willing to work together, like as an entire island for some of these projects?
Well, it makes so in a lot of cases these projects are tied to what's called a cost-benefit ratio or analysis. So it would behoove a community on a barrier island to partner with the other communities along a barrier island, because as we all know, flooding doesn't really care about municipal boundaries.
Right.
So in terms of going in for grant funds, for example, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grants or Resilient NJ or any FEMA type grant, it makes sense to do it at a regional level. With the way the grant funding agencies see it, you get more bang for your buck. So,
right.
What's great about the New Jersey Coastal Coalition is that there is so much cooperation between the communities. So there is a lot of work being done together. And I see a lot of that with a lot of the nonprofit organizations as well, working with individual communities and then bringing others together.
And I'm sure you've noticed in your studies and with these projects, a lot of communities are different, and so are their issues. So
Right.
Do you think that is accounted for during these planning and development?
Yes. So if there's one thing I've learned working at the shore throughout my career is that no two towns are the same, but they all have they all have similar issues, but a one-size-all-fits-all approach may not be the best move.
Okay.
So one town may need to adopt higher bulkheads, where another town may need to do some more wetland restoration to stop storm waves from impacting, for example, Barnegat Bay, where there's a large fetch and you can get large waves moving across the bay. Community on the bay side may want to do a wetland restoration, where another community may have bulkhead failing issues, or raising the elevation with an ordinance, something like that.
So how do you bring the communities together in order to get one project underway?
Well, I think organizing with nonprofit organizations like the New Jersey Coastal Coalition are extremely important, but also reaching out to your local leaders, municipal leaders, and having them work together. There's a lot of work being done also with the Association of Floodplain Managers. There's a lot of community engagement with there. So it's really just a matter of getting people in the same room talking about the problems, because one of the things you'll hear is that a lot of these towns have the same issues coming up.
Now, the costs of these projects, I mean, we are talking millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
How would that compare to the flood damages that have even already occurred or that could possibly occur?
Well, there was a recent study on mitigation that I think was published by FEMA recently. So for every dollar spent on flood mitigation, you get $6 back. So it really pays to get ahead of this. So one of the things after Sandy was, that I really tried to preach, and I think it's really, people are really starting to take to heart, is we need to be proactive as opposed to reactive. Because it's, the storms we're going to get another storm, we're going to be flooded, so we just need to understand where the risks are and what we have to do to be more resilient to these types of events.
Okay. Now, you are talking on more of a larger scale.
Yeah.
Even as a municipality, that could be a large-scale project.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what advice would you have for just residents or business owners or even visitors on how to better prepare themselves for a coastal flooding event, or even get more information about how to protect themselves?
I've always said no before you go. So a lot of times during the summertime, it's beautiful out. We're going to the beach. We don't really think about coastal storm events or tidal flooding, but the reality is we are getting flooded, even in the summertime on a sunny day. So there are a tremendous amount of resources through the academic institutions and the federal government and the state institutions, just in terms of like Google Maps type applications that can show you the flooding level. So, for example, Stevens has their surge modeling website, where you can actually go onto specific sites and they can tell you if flooding is going to be minor, moderate, severe during a given event, and they can project out how the flooding is going to be. So in those types of situations, I would absolutely recommend, if you see a storm coming up the coast, just Google tidal flooding or surge modeling or tides in New Jersey, and a lot of that information will become available. And additionally, on the beach side, my former colleagues at Stockton, they always publish their beach reports annually to track how the sand's moving, whether shore protection projects have occurred. So you can go out, and they can typically identify where the hotspots are with the erosion, things like that. So it really pays to be informed, and there's a lot of great research and great resources in the state of New Jersey here. There's a lot of minds working together here.
I mean, I've noticed that if you live here, you know which roads flood.
Yeah.
I think the greater challenge is for the people that don't know which roads flood, and they could be visiting or possibly taking a route that they've never traveled before, and there's 2 feet of floodwaters right on the Black Horse Pike, and they don't know where to go. So I think that's a big challenge, and something that you should look up before you go.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, just in terms of driving, things like that. I know I believe the DEP Coastal Land Use Planning Group is working on coming up with those local scale maps to show where just nuisance flooding occurs during just a rain event and a high tide, or a northeast wind that's doing some tidal stacking in a back bay. So there are maps that are available, and there are resources online that people can use.
Now, how else do you think that social media has influenced people, especially with more awareness and information out there regarding flooding?
Oh, social media has been incredibly effective at bringing awareness to just general public, and especially communities along the coast. As I said, I grew up in Holgate section of Long Beach Island, Long Beach Township, and the area was completely devastated during Hurricane Sandy. So following Hurricane Sandy, there was a community group that was established on Facebook called the Holgate Update Group. And a lot of times with these groups, they kind of fade off after a while. But the community engagement that has gone on through that group has been incredible.
Okay.
So there's so much engagement in terms of updates on the beach replenishment, updates on any coastal engineering structures that are being repaired. For example, the terminal groin at the end of Long Beach Island there. Any type of project that's happening with wetlands restoration, dredging. There's been so much engagement. I really do think that Sandy was that trigger that really got people engaged. One of the things I've noticed growing up at the beach, people tend to have a short memory on severe events because they just want to forget and move on. But I really do think in terms of social media, it's been incredibly effective at keeping people aware of how bad it can be down here during a storm.
Right. And even so, it doesn't have to be a major storm,
Nope.
a hurricane. We do experience flooding all year round.
Yep.
And it is something we have to be aware of.
Yep.
I will start looking at your questions or hellos. Hold on one second here. Again, we have Dan Barone from the Michael Baker International. And let's see what we got. Any questions?
There you go.
Dan Skeldon says hi.
Okay.
Under the weather,
Oh,
yeah.
poor guy. Those meteorologists, they're always getting sick.
Ray says knowing when high tides and low tides occur is a big help.
Yes.
And you can get that on your smartphone daily. Liz says, love Holgate, LBI.
Yeah. Hi, Liz.
We have a hello from Susan.
Yeah.
Teresa says, love Tidal Flooding Talk and feel better, Dan. And of course, Kristen says hi. Hi, Kristen. No questions. I guess you must have answered
I
them
guess
before people had a
nailed
chance to ask. Yep. But is there anything else you want to get out there, especially about the company that you work for, how the public or viewers can learn more about?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we're really trying to help inform just not only the general public but also governments and things like that is we're trying to use technology to demonstrate flooding issues and also some of the work that can be done to address flooding issues. So one of the things that I'm working on, I'm part of our national coastal practice at Michael Baker International. And some of the folks on our team out of our Alexandria office and myself and some others around the country have been working on what are called story maps. So actually a couple of my colleagues from Alexandria just won an award from the city of Annapolis for building some of these story maps that really tend to tie in the geographic component of a city, but also you're able to zoom in on a map and identify areas that are flooding, the history of the area, the history of the flooding, and some of the work that can be done to address that. So those are the types of things that we're building. We also have other types of mapping applications, all online, that are available. You can contact me or contact Michael Baker International for that information. But we're also showcasing through this type of mapping application the existing projects that we're doing. So we've done navigation projects, transportation mapping, so for dredging problems and identifying beneficial uses for dredged material. Then we've also done a lot of hydrodynamic modeling type work to address where flooding can occur during given storm events in a specific estuary. So there's lots of types of the things we've done, but we've also done some planning work as well.
So is there a direct website you would say people can go onto, or do you want us to tell us and then we'll put it on there? I don't know if you know
it's michaelbigerinternational.com, but our group and our company is very active on the LinkedIn website.
Okay.
So you can come to my LinkedIn webpage. I post all of that information up there, and all of my colleagues do as well. So that's probably the easiest way to get to me. But I'm also on Facebook, and I'm also on Instagram, and all those places. posting things about beaches and
Wonderful.
science and things like that.
All right, well, for those of you who live here, this is important to you because we're right here on the beach and flooding is affecting us weekly or monthly, sporadically.
Yeah.
So Dan, the New Jersey Coastal Coalition would like to thank you for joining us
It's
tonight.
my pleasure.
And of course you will be leaving here with an Irish pub t-shirt.
Love me
There
some
you
Irish
go.
pub.
And again, we're brought to you by the New Jersey Coastal Coalition here at the Irish Pub in Atlantic City. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or just log on to our website, njcoastalcoalition.com. And Dan Skeldon, I hope you feel better, and that's all tonight. Thank you.
Thanks.